Hello my lovelies and welcome to today's video. I'm reviewing two books. This is going to be for One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston and Radical Love by Neil Blakemore. So it is queer galore. I've read these both back kind of around summer, autumny time last year, and I have been meaning for the longest time to sit down and natter about them both with you. So I thought, why not just combine the video, pop them together and share them that way. So let's start with One Last Stop. Both of these books, by the way, are 5 out of 5 star reads for me. I had the best time reading both of these for very different reasons. They're very different in tone in comparison with each other, but they showcase queer love and identity in the best and the worst ways. It's heartbreaking, but like both of them have some difficult themes and topics and struggles, but they are uplifting at the heart of them, I would say. So, as I say, we're starting with One Last Stop. For cynical 23-year-old August, moving to New York is supposed to prove her right, that things like magic and cinematic love stories don't exist, and the only smart way to go through life is alone. She can't imagine how waiting tables at a 24-hour pancake diner and moving in with too many weird roommates could possibly change that. And there's certainly no chance of her subway commute being anything more than a daily trudge through boredom and electrical failures. But then there's this gorgeous girl on the train, Jane. Dazzling, charming, mysterious, impossible Jane. Jane with her rough edges and swooping hair and soft smile, showing up in a leather jacket to save August's day when she needed it the most. August's subway crush becomes the best part of her day, but pretty soon she discovers there's one big problem. Jane doesn't just look like an old school punk rocker. She's literally displaced in time from the 1970s. And August is going to have to use everything she tried to leave in her own past to help her. August gets to wondering that maybe there are some things she should start believing in after all. This is a fantastic book. As soon as I read that synopsis, I was like, holy shit, because I didn't expect it to take this magical realism route with like the time travel aspect. I just thought it was going to be a beautiful like romance with maybe like a grumpy sunshine kind of trope, but what we got was even more than that, and I was so here for it. I loved this book so much. It was just even more than I expected it to be, and I think that's what kind of shook me to my core, because I already thought I was going to very much enjoy it, but as I was reading, more things were just coming to the surface, and I didn't want to leave this story, you know. It was one of those reads. So invested in the world of August and her friends and of Jane and her time. It felt so magical and romantic, but realistic in the way everything was handled. Heart was time and time again torn apart. I didn't want to feel all these emotions, but at the same time I had to. Like, I just couldn't not read it. Honestly, probably one of the reasons why I dragged this book out for so long, because it did take me longer than I expected to get through, but honestly it was because of that duality. I didn't want to feel the emotions, but I also didn't want to not read it, so I was like eking it out and then coming back and devouring it and then putting it away. It was just so complex. I loved all the characters. I feel like they all had their individual merits that added to the story and added to August's character growth as kind of like our main centre character, and sort of helped her to become vulnerable and open and kind of find her tribe, you know. I don't even know who my favourite character was. They were all so incredible. Of course, we had August and Jane. I loved them. We had Mila and Nico, who were such an adorable couple, and oh my god, I just loved everything about them. There's Wes and Isaac. You get what I'm saying. Everybody had something that I absolutely adored, that added something to the story, that added something to character growth, and just little details like that just made it fleshed out and believable. It was moving, it was beautiful, it was such a magical queer love story. Very realistic in its approach to the magic, as I mentioned earlier. What I loved about it was that it reflected both the platonic and romantic queer love in the best possible way. I adored this one, and I went on a rampage looking for any and all fan art I could for the characters in this book, because I just needed more of them in my life. So that was One Last Stop by Casey McQuiston. I haven't read anything else by the author yet, but I do believe they've written Red, White and Royal Blue, which my buddy's reading at the moment. So hopefully she enjoys that and can give me a heads up of whether that one's just as good. And I really need to recommend this one to her because this was just exquisite. Okay, on to Radical Love by Neil Blakemore. This one I also, of course, gave a 5 out of 5 stars. Welcome to England, 1809. London is a violent, intolerant city exhausted by years of war. By day, John Church preaches on the radical possibilities of love to a multicultural, working-class congregation in Southwark. But by night, he crosses the river to the secret and glamorous world of a gay molly house on Vere Street. There, Church becomes the first minister to offer marriages between men at enormous risk. Everything changes when Church meets the unworldly and free-thinking Ned, part of a group of African activist abolitionists who attend his chapel. The two bond over their broken childhoods, and Church falls obsessively in love with Ned's tender nature. What really intrigued me about the story is that it's based on true events. These are based on real lives, queer history, and of course is talking about subjects relating to gender and sexuality in a dangerous time period. This was a mesmerising, harrowing, and in the context of narrative, manipulative and misleading historical fiction. I feel like if you read it, you know what I mean in terms of how some of our characters portray themselves. Fascinating, so much depth there. Let's move on. This was such an intense account of John Church growing up in 1800s London. As we explore the world through John's eyes, you can't help but sympathise. The way he shaped his life, he has this kind of charismatic, charming way about him. Obviously, that is bringing the masses to his church, right? But under certain lights, manipulation and just a taint, just something not quite kind rears its ugly head in some of the acts and the things that John Church does. The streets of London are dark and they're gritty, and the beliefs about anything other is much the same. So seeing the underground radical community push back in the form of love in all its colourful glory felt so liberating and rebellious, and the excitement in which we as the reader was drawn into this story was absolutely dizzying. I think Church as a narrator really captivates the audience and draws you ever more into his story, so much so that you do get spun around a little bit and a little bit clouded to some of the things that he's more biased to, but nevertheless a whirlwind of an adventure, seeing this amazing walk of life, this complete sort of parallel life to the dark grey gritty London sort of above, you know, that everybody else is seeing. I also loved that, as well as homophobia and same-sex relationships, we are talking about the black community in a time where slavery was still rampant in a lot of countries, despite abolitionist campaigns happening across country. We have black people actively living their life and living it well as they can. It's such a contrast, because you see that aspect, but then you can still see how communities are viewed with such open hostility and mistreatment in the streets. So when John is seen frequently together with his African assistant Ned, heads begin to turn and tongues begin to wag, and obviously that adds even more of a sort of speculation and dirty looks, rumours kind of spreading among the fact that, first of all, they seem very close for two people being of the same sex, but also when you mix into that mould their separate racial identities, you get even more of a complex narrative. And I think the way that this story unravelled it and sort of dissected and talked about it was just absolutely well done. The relationship between Church and Ned was a difficult one. We have two very hurt people just trying to get by and be loved, really. That's like the ultimate goal for anyone in life, isn't it? And be accepted in their own rights, yet the world is not willing to accept them. Simultaneously, the relationship is not healthy. and manipulation can soon be seen as the narration progresses and our narrator begins to admit to some omissions of the truth that he'd previously edited out of his account. So that's when I say that this kind of the storytelling being from John Church was so complex, because really it's quite unreliable. You're getting all this wonderful conversation on how he's doing amazing for the queer community, yet he's still very much entrenched in his faith and what he believes, and how he can see them marrying together, how he's passionate about abolishing slavery. At the same time, there's so much that he's lied about, and you start to wonder, what else are you lying about? What else are you hiding, right? Because you've been so taken in by this charismatic, kind person, you sort of forgive some things that kind of sit a bit funny with you, you know? At least that's how I felt. The writing style was so incredibly Moorish, yet it was filled with this authentic, crass language that thrust you right into the setting of gritty London in the 1800s. I didn't want to put this book down. I didn't want it to end, and I'm so glad that I decided to pick this up and give it a try. Anyway, that is my review for both One Last Stop and Radical Love, showcasing some brilliant queer stories in the literature sphere. Let me know if you have read any of these books or anything similar. You have any recommendations? I would love to know as usual. But for now, that is me signing off. Thank you so much for watching, and I shall catch you in another video soon. Bye.